What's up, everybody? It's TJ back again with the 626 Productions sports podcast. It's been 2 months. Still don't have a name yet for it, but we're finally back after seemingly the craziest start to a year possible for us. Pat, how have you been?
Been good, man. Been good. Like you said, it's been a little hectic, a little busy, but trying to stay on top of everything that's been happening here in the sports world recently.
Yeah, and we missed a pretty important part of the sports season or sports calendar year. We had the Super Bowl, where we had the Chiefs, kind of expect them to be there. Got the Eagles, which pretty good team. We saw them; they had a good chance to make it there, but did not expect that outcome whatsoever.
Yeah, that was definitely a little bit out of left field. I think for pretty much everybody, even Eagles fans. Going in, I thought the Eagles had a pretty good shot. Their defense had been playing pretty well up until that point, but I did not envision it going down like that, where the game was pretty much over by halftime.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. It was quite surprising, and I mean, even going into halftime, I was still like, "It's the Chiefs. It's the Super Bowl. They're going to find a way. Something's going to happen." And they came out of the locker room looking arguably worse. And I was like, well, there's that. Eagles are a champion in about 15 minutes. So, yeah, very shocking. And yeah, like you say, Eagles fans did not see that coming, but I don't think that they will be too displeased with the outcome of that game. I'm pretty sure I just had 7 negatives in that sentence, but they all cancel out. But either way, Eagles are the champions. What a massive year for them. Jalen Hurts gets his Super Bowl. I would say, like, of the Bama quarterbacks, obviously Tua has been very good, uh, but has been injury ridden. Did not expect Jalen Hurts to have this good of an NFL career. So a big shout out and congrats to him.
Yeah, he's definitely punched above his weight a little bit, I feel like. But he's in that perfect system for him and what he does as a player. And the Eagles really know how to use him and use his strengths, especially when they pair a guy like Saquon with him in the backfield.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, Saquon, yeah, that's just a cheat code. Giants fans have to be just ticked about the outcome of everything. Like, just let him walk, goes to the Eagles, immediately wins the championship. I mean, can't blame Saquon. Can't blame him at all with how things were going in New York. The team's not really that great around you. You go to Philly, better team, better pay, and you win a Super Bowl immediately. I mean, that's kind of what you want to do. So, hats off to him. He had a great season. What was he? 80 yards off the record.
Yeah, he came really, really close to Dickerson's record.
Yes, I mean Dickerson did have what, three less games, but nonetheless, still very impressive that he almost got that close in today's football. So that wrapped up our football season. So you have Ohio State and Philadelphia taking home the two championships for football this year. And then that moves all of our attention to basketball. Um, and more importantly for us, college basketball. We're getting into conference tournaments right now. Um, I believe yesterday was the first day of tournaments. Wasn't it? Sun Belt tipped off.
Yeah, I believe the Sun Belt tipped off yesterday.
So that should be an interesting tournament to watch just based on their layout alone, how it is just uh, top and bottom Survivor Series style almost. Um, is I think it's the only tournament that has that layout. So it should be interesting there just from a entertainment perspective. I'm not really expecting a Final Four team to come out of that conference, but it should be fun nonetheless. All of the power conferences will start next week, except for the Big 12. Actually, I see that Kansas and Houston play each other today. Uh, is that just regular conference play or is that their tournament?
Yeah, that's regular conference play today.
Okay,
And
makes sense.
then I want to say their conference tournament starts next Tuesday. I want to say
Okay,
it's the 11th when the Big 12 tips.
gotcha. So, but I mean, a matchup like that, Houston and Kansas, lost a little bit of its luster for what we would expect at the start of the year. Houston still playing about where everyone would see them. Kansas not looking like Kansas. They'll still be a tournament team, but it's not a top three seed like they're used to.
Yeah, I think everybody at Jayhawk Nation is definitely a little bit disappointed with the way this season's turned out, especially when Hunter Dickinson announced that he was going to come back for this season. There's a lot of pretty lofty expectations that they would be right up there with, Duke, Tennessee, Auburn as some of the top teams coming into this season. And it started off good for the Jayhawks, but ever since conference play has kind of come around, it's been super, super up and down. Very, very roller coaster season for Kansas and for Bill Self.
Yeah, very, very shocking there. Big 12 as a conference, obviously Kansas has stepped back a little bit, but I would say overall play in that conference has improved. Of course, you see the additions of the Arizonas, Utahs into that conference, which, especially a team like Arizona, helps boost the overall caliber of
Mm-hmm.
that conference. And I mean, talk about conference caliber. SEC this year. Man, that is like almost a G League with how good they have been. I believe that they're probably going to get 14 out of 16 in. It looks like right now. Maybe it'll probably end up being 13 of 16, but is insane how many teams one are ranked. So they're going to get in regardless. And then there's other ones that are on the bubble, but they look like they're going to be in. I think
Yeah.
Texas, Oklahoma, and South Carolina are the ones that are probably missing, if that's correct.
So what I've seen recently is it looks like South Carolina definitely, LSU definitely are not going to make it, and then kind of depending on who you trust as your bracketologist depends on what the third team that they say is going to miss is. I've seen a lot of people saying Georgia is going to fall short, and then
Hmm.
some other people have said flip Georgia with either Texas or Oklahoma. It's really Texas, Georgia, and Oklahoma kind of right on that chopping line with Arkansas, not too high ahead of them either.
Yeah, and Arkansas, that was a team that a lot. I mean, they've been good the last couple of years, but they really wanted to keep going. They went out, got Calipari, and it's year one, but also basketball is a little bit different than these other sports where you can do things in one year, and Arkansas is not getting that. You gotta expect the Razorback Nation is going to be a bit upset, like especially one if they somehow drop out of the tournament, which they did take a very bad loss to South Carolina, who is by far the worst team in that conference. Um, and like they're only seeming to stumble as we get to the season. So I mean, if they don't win one or two games in conference tournament, they could see themselves on the outside looking in, which has got to be a massive failure for Arkansas under Calipari.
Yeah, I don't think this is what Arkansas fans envisioned when they hired Cal this offseason. But I guess the pros and the cons of playing in a conference like the SEC is, if you win your last two conference games midweek this week and this weekend, put yourself in a decent position going into the SEC tournament, you're going to get an opportunity more than likely against a decently well respected opponent. If you can pick up one or two wins down in Nashville, then you're really boosting your resume and you're putting yourself in a really solid position come Selection Sunday. So I feel like that's got to be the mindset for Arkansas, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma. Take care of business and just beat who you're supposed to beat.
Yeah, no, 100% for those teams. Outside of the SEC, who would you even say is the number two conference this year? I mean, the ACC has taken a large step back in their overall quality. I mean, you got Duke, Clemson up there at the top, but I mean, a team like UNC, who's always at the top, is not playing great basketball this season. Like, who's kind of filling that void?
I'd say the Big Ten. And, this is kind of the trend that we're seeing emerge in our two major college sports is that it's the SEC and the Big Ten really dominating or really being top heavy in terms of representation. Last I checked, I think the Big Ten's projected to get 10 or 11 teams into the tournament, so they're not far behind the SEC. But you're definitely right when it comes to the ACC. The ACC is super down this year. I think probably unless North Carolina goes on some crazy run at the ACC tournament, I think they're probably only going to get 3 teams in, which is obviously disappointing if you're an ACC fan, seeing how far that conference has sort of slipped in terms of its basketball pedigree.
Yeah, I mean, you go look back, you know, not even 10 years, maybe 5 years. ACC and Big East were the two best conferences in basketball, and it was not really much of a conversation. That was just the fact. And the SEC was a lesser conference outside of the top two, top three teams. You'd have a Florida in there, you'd have an Auburn, a Tennessee, but that's really about where all that went. And then next thing you know, you see a Bama pick up, you see a randomly good LSU team, and then all of a sudden these random one-off teams started getting good. Like Alabama now, the last 3-4 years under Nate Oates has been good every single season, and obviously the ACC has had to deal with some coaching changes. Obviously, you have Roy Williams stepping down at UNC. That has clearly harmed them a lot.
Mm.
Coach K at Duke, they're able to keep their stride a little bit better. Um, but I mean, college basketball is probably the sport that has changed the most in who our power conferences and power teams are. Um, you still have some of the original blue bloods still up there, but I think you're starting to see a lot of dying giants.
Yeah, I think definitely in this NIL era, you see a lot more parity. Um, like we saw this year in college football, it's not just college basketball that's seen, so maybe like traditionally middle of the road, middle of the pack teams rise up and kind of make more of a national household name for themselves. But I don't know. I think it's good for the sport in the sense that there's not a clear cut national champion. Going into the past 2 NCAA tournaments, I think most people would have felt pretty comfortable and pretty safe saying UConn was going to be the national champion at the end of the tournament, especially last year where they looked to be comfortably the best team all year. Purdue had its flashes, but I think everybody kind of felt or realized that UConn would be able to match what Purdue did with Zach Edey a little bit better than some smaller teams or some less athletic teams. But this year it's really wide open. I mean, Auburn's a great team, but Auburn also has had a huge history of choking every time they get to the NCAA tournament. Bruce Pearl, even when he was at Tennessee, also had those similar issues. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen there? Duke's had its shaky moments. We just got done talking about how the ACC isn't this power conference that it used to be. So, yes, they are, I think, 25 or 26-3. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, look at the quality of opponent that they're playing. It's not like they're playing a Big 10, Big 12 SEC schedule. So maybe they would struggle with some of those other teams. So I think it's going to be really interesting come tournament time. And I don't think we have a clear head and shoulders above favorite this year.
Yeah, I mean, as I look at even the teams that are receiving votes, I look at all that with how open this season has been. Because I mean, outside of the top, 6, 7 teams, everyone's got 5 or more losses. Of course, there's a couple lower teams like a St. Mary's who's sitting at 27-4, but they'll bump up as well. They just had a win against Gonzaga the other night, uh, who is also receiving votes. So, I mean, those two teams out of the West Coast Conference, they'll be in. Uh, and Gonzaga's been there; they can make a run. St.
Mm.
Mary's has consistently had good teams, just not. They've been in Gonzaga's shadow for years now. So, I mean, Gonzaga's taken a step back. They probably will win the West Coast Conference this year. St. Mary's will. So, I mean, you could have a team like that competing. You never know. I mean, a lot of these teams, I think, can contend. Even a UConn team who's unranked, they've been there sometimes that's all it takes. What do I think they're my champion? No, absolutely not. But do I think they have the capability of making runs? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think
So
I don't.
yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think one
no,
of the
no,
more
no. Go ahead, go ahead.
interesting stories this year in college basketball has been in the Big East. Actually, yes, it's been a down year for the conference. You're not seeing that 7-8 bid league that you had even just 2 or 3 years ago, but um, St. John's has been playing some fantastic basketball in year two under Rick Pitino, and that's supposed to be the magic year. Year two is when his teams take those big leaps and strides forward, and you definitely see that this year with the Johnnies being a comfortable top 10 team. I'd argue probably should be a top 5 team in the country right now, as they're just kind of rolling through the Big East, and I'm sure everybody in St. John's fandom or country, whatever you want to call it, is ecstatic that they're building their program back to where it used to be in the late 80s, early 90s, before it took that slide in the modern era.
Yeah, they're sitting at number 6 right now in both polls, and I would probably agree with you. However, the teams in front of them are, I mean, it's those teams are quite strong. I mean, St. John's, haven't gotten to watch them as much this year. They have them right above Alabama and Michigan State, which I agree with, having been able to watch those teams a little bit more. But then you have a Florida, a Tennessee, a Houston, Duke, Auburn. It's like those are good teams. So I mean, I'm not mad with where they are in the poll personally, because I mean, where they move up 1 or 2 spots, it's the same seeding for them at that point. And then once you get into the tournament, all you do is win.
Yep.
And I would be hard pressed to believe that St. John's wouldn't be making at least a Elite Eight run this season.
Yeah, no, they've got a really good team, really deep team. The addition of Kadari Richmond this year through the transfer portal has been huge for them, giving them a little bit more offensive balance than they had last year. So, like we said, awesome story. And I agree with you. Those teams in front of them are great teams. I don't know. I know Florida beat Auburn, but I might flip flop them in Florida just because Florida has shown it can get itself into a little bit of trouble on multiple occasions, in the sense that when they came to Columbia, um, they were down 15 at one point to a not great South Carolina team. They were down big to Georgia the other night, and they did wind up losing that game. But they just get themselves in these holes sometimes, which can be a little bit worrying. But overall, like we said, great team.
Yeah, no, 100%. I want to raise this question here now because we'll probably be able to get another little podcast show in before the tournament truly gets going. But I want to ask who you have right now as a Final Four team, or your Final Four rather.
Man, that's a tough question. I think it all depends on what the final seeding is come selection Sunday. If St. John stays on that 5 line and, or excuse me, 6 line, and they're the number 2 overall 2 seed. I think I'd
Mm-hmm.
like them a little bit more than if they were the number 1 overall 2 seed, just from a matchups perspective, and we'll say like an ease of bracket perspective. But if I had to pick a Final Four right now, I think I'd say Duke, St. John's, Michigan State, and oh man, I'll say Houston. I've been high on Houston the past few tournaments, and whether it's injury or poor shooting, they've kind of let me down a little bit. But I'm still believing in Kelvin Sampson and what he's building.
Yeah, I love that Houston pick. I was sitting there when you were going through it. I was like, man, he's got to go Houston here at some point. Um, but yeah, I'm with you on some of that. I don't really like the Duke pick. I think that they will. I think they'll get like a couple wins in a tournament, but I don't know. There's something about this Duke team that's not selling me like on their ability to just make the run. I really like Auburn in there. I like Houston. Um, Something telling me, which this at this point, this is no longer like a Cinderella story. They are a good team. Texas Tech,
Mm.
um, and I haven't really gotten to see very much from them this season. I'm just seeing a lot of their score lines and their matchups. For whatever reason, I'm getting pulled to them, to Texas Tech. And then I think, unfortunately, as much as I don't want to see it, and I think as much as the country outside of the Southeast doesn't want to see it, I think Alabama gets in,
Oh wow.
which could be setting up for a very interesting either Final Four or national title if it's Auburn and Alabama. Um, and I don't want to see this Alabama team. I can't stand NATO's. I can't stand that team. Uh, that's not a pick of oh, hopefully they get there. That is just surely that's another team who they've been there recently. Like they know how to win in
Yeah.
March. They know
Yeah.
how to go through the tournament, how to prepare, and sometimes that is just more important than being good. Having that experience is, you can't trade that.
Yeah, no, I get that pick, and helps that they've got like 45-year-old Mark Sears as their leader in the clubhouse there. Who knows how he still has eligibility, but yeah, that's a well coached team. They play hard. They play great defense. I could definitely see Bama making a deep run, and that's the crazy thing this year. You know, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, they all have really really good teams, and just because a team might be third in that conference doesn't mean that they aren't a true contender. Even Iowa State, all the way down at number 10, they were at, I think, number 3 in the country at one point this year.
Right. Yep.
So it just shows the depth that these top conferences have, and that no night in this major conference or Power Five conference, whatever you want to label it, is an easy night. That these guys are being battle tested. So I think we're in for a really fun tournament. I'm excited to see how some of these smaller conference tournaments shake out the next few days/week here. I'd love to see maybe like a High Point or um, Liberty, team like that. That's kind of been taking care of business in their conference. I'd love to see them get in there and maybe make a little bit of noise. Even McNeese State, I know they made it last year, but they kind of didn't really rise to the occasion. Something like that, I think it's going to be awesome for college basketball, and I think we've got a great March ahead of us.
I think High Point, regardless of their tournament, I think High Point should be in. I mean, they've had a great season this year. I think what they're playing for now, unless they just bomb in their tournament, like they're one and done, that would obviously be a massive step back for them. But I think as long as they win 2-3 games, they're in. They're just playing for seeding at that point, with the conference title. I think that the Panthers have had a incredible season, and I didn't know this. Shocked, they've never made the dance.
Yeah,
This would be the first time ever, which I'm quite shocked that a team like that in North Carolina, basketball hotbed for decades now in college, has not made the tournament.
yeah, yeah. I remember last year they had a really good shot. They were hosting the Big South tournament at High Point last year. I don't know where it is this year, and they wound up getting upset. And there were some questions on if they would be able to make another run this year, but they've had a great season. I think the thing that hurts them is the conference that they play in. They don't really have. I'm looking at their schedule right now. Any quad one wins. I think their best win is probably at home against North Texas, but just because they play in the Big South doesn't mean they're not a good team. We saw that um, with those Winthrop teams that would show up and be scrappy sometimes. So, yeah, I think it'd be interesting and fun if High Point makes their first appearance this year.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing, and you know, have the potential weapons to have a good a little Cinderella run for them. So obviously, it all depends on where they end up seeding and match up against. But I mean, you never know. We've seen some 16 seed upsets now, so truly, no one is safe anymore.
That's true. That's true.
So I want to go back to the conferences real quick. I mean, we've started talking. We haven't talked about the Big Ten as much, or at least I have not today. You have a little bit. Um, and then the SEC. Those two conferences, obviously, football being the main driver, it is almost like our Power Four, Power Five system is now being tiered into three. You have the group of five at the bottom. You have kind of like the ACC, Pac 12, uh, Big 12, and then SEC and Big Ten. I mean, they're really just starting to emerge in every single sport as the best two conferences. I think the only sport that you could say that there's still a power three or power four is baseball right now. But
Mm.
I mean, I would say give it a couple more years with how the Big Ten has been going because SEC is very good. ACC plays some pretty good ball, and Big 12 plays some pretty good ball. So that's the only one that I would say the Big Ten lacks in. But then you look in every other sport, and it's track and field, all SEC, all Big Ten, uh, basketball, women's basketball. It's really like a second minor league to me. Those two conferences. I mean, they just play, and the facilities are top in the country. It's just a completely different brand. Do you think that those two may look to ever leave the NCAA? Do you think that that would ever happen?
Man, I hope not, for the sake of college sports and everything that college sports was, I guess you could say. I don't think we can really say is supposed to be anymore. But I could definitely see those conferences having some conversations with each other in the coming years, especially if the playoff committee doesn't want to play ball when it comes to football, guaranteeing four spots to the SEC and to the Big Ten if we move to another expanded playoff. I could see them having those conversations of forming their own organization or forming their own league, and withdrawing from the NCAA and almost, treating it like, I guess you could say, um, like a draft preparation type thing, right? You
Mhm.
see guys do that with basketball, going to teams in the G League, and doing their player preparation. The Thompson twins did that. Scoot Henderson did that in the recent draft classes. So, I mean, it's not completely unheard of, but I really hope for the sake of the sport as a whole, it doesn't come to that, because losing matchups like, um, I, I know it hasn't been as heated in recent years since Maryland went to the Big Ten, but Maryland Duke as a rivalry, or South Carolina Clemson as a rivalry, or the chance for, like we saw in the national championship this year, Ohio State to play another huge name in the Midwest and Notre Dame. Things like that, I feel like should be treasured and should be preserved in college sports and in college athletics. Yes, it's a business. Yes, these colleges want to make money, but I think we really need to remember what the heart of collegiate competition is about, and the fact that I think if you ask a lot of fans of college sports, whether it's college basketball, college baseball, college football, I think a lot of them would say that for them, the rivalries for their collegiate teams oftentimes run deeper than for their professional sports teams. Um, Obviously, you have some exceptions there, like Red Sox, Yankees, Giants, Dodgers, um, Eagles, Cowboys, things like that are super wide scale national matchups. But there's just something so special and so unique about college sports that I really, really hope we don't go down that path of the Big Ten and the SEC saying, we are the cream of the crop. So either give us a higher percentage of revenue or we're gone.
Yeah. No, I really like that take there. I think personally I'm a little bit more open and almost in a way want to see that than you are. But taking it back to like the roots argument, where it's like you lose those rivalries, you lose what you know, like you almost play the whole season just to get that specific game. Obviously, a
Hmm.
championship is like great, conference or national title, and now the playoffs. Like all of that is still great, but you know, for me growing up, I got to Thanksgiving, uh, Thanksgiving Day or that weekend for Carolina Clemson, and it was like we could be 0-11, and if we beat Clemson, that's a great season.
Hmm.
Um, and I know that there's some other rivalries out there as well where you have a bad year, whatever, you you beat that team, or like you have a Florida State. I mean, that's another rivalry that's cooled off though.
Yeah.
But what one of those teams could be 8-5 or 8-3, 9-2 going in. The other team's 5-6. And it's like, well, does this bowl game really do, or does this rivalry game really do much for a bowl game for national title implications? No. But can we keep them out of a bowl game? Yes.
Hmm.
And it's more beating them so they don't win versus the opposite. And some of that is just like you say, what makes college sports what it is. You don't see that kind of rivalry, that hatred in a lot of the professional sports. On the flip side, though, the reason I want to see it, the SEC would need to boost up a couple more teams, but essentially it could be that de facto NFL minor league that it has almost been already. Um, and instead of being an NFC and an AFC, it's a Big Ten, SEC,
Mm.
two divisions or two conferences rather at 20 teams each, 40-team league, and in a way the NFL would probably want this because it kind of helps them out with a lot of the markets that they're not already in. Decently sized markets like Columbus, who NFL is not really chomping to get to. They have an MLS side, they have an NHL team. They're probably not going to get an NFL team, but you have this minor league team all of a sudden that may or may not be influenced by the NFL. There's some money there. Same for other markets as well, or like having a second team, like some cities that could potentially have one. Um, like having a team like in Chicago and a Northwestern. Like,
Mm.
is there really an NFL team that would go in behind the Bears? Not really. Well,
Yeah.
there is this other potential minor league team in that sense. Um, so then that kind of fills a niche that they're not really motivated to answer now, but if they get it, they're like, I'm not mad about this.
Hmm.
Same with you would have another team in Seattle with Washington. You would have a team close to the Portland market on the West Coast. You'd have two teams in LA. So I mean, a lot of those. I mean, although I saw something the other day that LA might get another team to. Who knows what the NFL is thinking on their expansion? That would actually be detrimental if
Yeah.
they got
Yeah.
another team. But I saw that that is where it's polling the most, which is
Mm. That would be a
crazy.
shame. Yeah.
That is just crazy to me. There's so many other great cities that deserve to have an NFL team. I truly, if LA gets a new team, I hope it's a new team. They put the Chargers back in San Diego. That would be my argument for it, because San Diego does deserve some sports teams rather than everyone leaving for LA.
Yeah.
So, but they did just get one new sports team. They got the San Diego FC, which they are already causing lots of shockwaves, not in a good way. They might be potentially the m- most foul mouthed fans in the league all of a sudden. I think they've already gotten reprimanded by MLS twice,
Yeah.
and they've played two matches. So, um, very funny situation down there. Obviously, it's they need to figure out what's going on, but it's like, how is a team 2 matches old getting in this much trouble? Um, let's take the fans out of it. That's actually might be a decent team down there in San Diego. Seems like a lot of the expansion teams are playing pretty well these days.
Definitely.
Um, so hopefully they can reel in their fans to a more appropriate standard. Uh, so it's not not the issue it is currently. Um, and then they can, you know, get to the soccer side of things, because I think unfortunately right now they're more known for their fans than the soccer, which is not necessarily a great thing. Um, but yeah, should be interesting to watch MLS in general this season. We have Club World Cup starting up this summer, and I think what, two MLS sides are in it, or is it just
Yeah.
one? Is it Seattle? I know Seattle's in it. Is there another MLS side?
Did they find a way to sneak Miami in there? I thought they might have found a way to
They might have.
backdoor.
Yeah, I think they might have. Let's see. We can do the old research right now while we're on. And let's see, where is it? They did. Inter Miami is in it.
Yeah.
Um,
You knew that was coming.
yeah. So should be interesting. This is going to be, I think, not the first time, but I would say like the first time that there's been actual widespread interest of soccer in the United States, that a tournament like this is being held. Um, I would expect there to be pretty good turnout. I know that FIFA is a little concerned and they've lowered ticket prices, but soccer is still probably the fourth at best favorite sport for most people in the U.S. It's probably close to third now, with you know, having basketball and baseball take a couple steps back. Uh, but still, I mean, it's not the same like it is in the rest of the world. But it should be a great display. That will be this summer.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the following summer, it will be the actual World Cup with, is this one 64 teams, right? Biggest World Cup in history.
Yeah.
So that should be quite incredible. US hopefully will not get grouped in that, but never know. There's still time to get General Berhalter back, so that
in,
way he makes sure that it happens.
in Poch we trust.
So that was the best thing from what was that, Nations League last year? That losing the piano.
Copa.
That was Copa. Oh gosh, yeah, man. You can tell that I don't really care about nations nations leagues and everything. Um, but yeah, straight red card. Was it 25th minute? Lost to Panama.
Yeah,
Got him fired though.
I was unfortunately in the building for that one. So Tim Weah was not a fan favorite in my home for a little while, but then once Bearhalter got fired, American hero. So
Tim Weah was unknowingly to most, and probably including himself, playing the long game in that match. So yeah, that was needed for the U.S. The fact that that whole situation went on for as long as it did, just, I feel like, symbolized and embodied U.S. soccer the last like 30 years, where it's like, we're going to be good. We're going to take this seriously. No, we're not. We're not going to do that. So, hopefully they finally turn the corner and we can put on a good show on our, you know, home field basically in the World Cup. But that will be next year. But like I said, this year's Club World Cup, MLS potentially switching to the European schedule next season. I don't know how they're going to do that. If they're just going to play the championship this year and then go right into next year. Have you seen anything on that?
I haven't. I think if they do decide that's the option, you might see a lot of bigger names miss some of the early season in the MLS because I mean, these guys just play so much these days. It's crazy. You've got everything that they do for club, plus all of these random tournaments that FIFA and UEFA have created, um, to essentially just play more international football for unknown reasons. But yeah, I think that could be a potentially dangerous thing to shift into the European lineup that quickly. I think you're setting yourself up for either a lot of guys sitting out early games in the season, or b a lot of injuries.
Yeah, I would almost more be in favor of a lighter season, whether it's the entire season be lighter or just schedule packet
Mm-hmm.
um, to the next season. You could always fill in some of like the lesser like game gaps with like maybe move the U.S. Open Cup early. That way you can see more MLS teams actually playing it again because Don Garber, the scheduling genius that he is, put in a new cup and then decided to take all of the teams out of the U.S. Open Cup and say there's too much schedule congestion when he created the schedule congestion. So hopefully we can see more MLS teams join the U.S. Open Cup. They're a lot better this season. I believe you're looking at a little over 50%.
Mm-hmm.
But then they at the same time took teams out of the new Leagues Cup. I think is what it's called. Yeah, Leagues Cup. Um, so now it's like 50-50 representation, but there's some teams that are in both cups. So if some teams are able to be in both cups, I understand why all teams can't be in both. I don't know.
That's MLS for you.
That is, yeah, quintessential MLS. Um, so hopefully they can get their act together. I think they might have to because USL is making moves. Um, I think they have almost gotten confirmed for D1 for their that new top division. They're going to do promotion and
Mm-hmm.
relegation. Uh, so finally, we're going to see a promotion and relegation in the United States. That will matter. Um, it will be championship, which is currently being played as the second division, and I'm not sure if it will go all the way down to USL 2. I know at least be two top divisions, which that'll be amazing. That'll be super important for soccer in the U.S. Hopefully, then the MLS. I mean, I would like to see the MLS get a deal and then everybody join in.
Yeah.
I think that would be preferably the best for soccer in the U.S. because right now it's all the major markets have their team in the MLS is what it is. Um, but it would be great, get 3-4 years down the line and you have Lexington FC playing up against Red Bull New York. That would be amazing. And just right
Yeah.
now, it's completely unheard of outside of maybe a a U.S. Open Cup match. But by that point, Red Bull probably is just joining into the tournament. You have Lexington FC, who would probably be on their like fourth game by that point. So I hope that they continue to go to this more European model. You can see the U.S. start making that transition. Like they're starting to make good ideas and like good decisions. They just need to commit to them. So we'll see over the next few years. Hopefully, the World Cup is what really whips everyone into shape. I think by that point, soccer in the U.S. will completely move forward. Another sport that kind of took a little soccer approach and it went amazing for them, hockey.
Yeah.
That Four Nations, that was amazing.
Yeah, that was a lot
I
of fun.
I heard a lot of people talking about that I didn't even know watched hockey. Um, and again, me personally, I'm not a huge, nations competitions person, but I was into it. That was great hockey. I mean, Canada, U.S., puck drop, 3 fights. I mean, those guys cared about those games. It wasn't just, an all-star break type of deal. It wasn't just just going to go through the motions, get this game done, wearing a different jersey. That mattered, arguably more than their actual like regular season. Like that was really cool to see.
Yeah, I think the NHL really killed it with Four Nations, turning the All Star break or All Star game, because that's essentially what it was, into something that had a little bit more gravity to it and had higher player buy-in. You look at a league like the NBA that's trying to figure out how to increase viewership and how to make the All Star game matter. Just look at what hockey did this year. If you, from the NBA's perspective, shifted to a US versus some international teams and maybe like a snub team or something like that perspective and do a tournament that way, I think that draws eyeballs. But hockey really killed it. We got to see US, Canada in a best on best twice in the same tournament, which
Mhm.
was great. Ultimately, obviously, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme, but ultimately, I would have loved to see the U.S. pull out the win in Boston. But it was some great hockey, super entertaining, building attention for the Winter Olympics, which are coming up, where we'll see some best on best international hockey again. And I don't know, maybe that's where I differ with you. I don't really watch the World Juniors a whole much and stuff like that, but I love Olympic hockey. I think it's super entertaining and it's a little bit more high paced and high action than the NHL, with oftentimes a little bit smaller ice, allowing for that quicker play. Um, and that quicker change of possession leading to, breakaways and things like that we don't see as frequently in the
Mhm.
NHL.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is true. It seems like Olympic hockey is a little bit more chaotic whenever you get down to it. So, you know, maybe we'll see a little bit of a hockey resurgence. I feel like a couple years ago we kind of felt it a little bit, then it's kind of died off again. So maybe it's just one of those cycles where the NHL and hockey in general, you know, goes down for a couple years and next, boom, right back up there. Like I know even the stadium series with Columbus and Detroit, me being on the West Coast, people were talking about that game. And
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously the Kraken being in Seattle now in the Northwest, that helps. But I think a couple of years ago, they would have been like, Columbus played where? In a stadium? They have a team? So yeah, I mean, hockey is continuing to go. I hope for the NBA's sake, they they take these notes and they see it, because they Adam Silver did come up with a new alternative for what we like know from like the traditional seasons. Like he put the in-season tournament in essentially the same as a cup competition in soccer, um, just with a group play during it as well. I wish that they would expand it more. It's almost like right now, which I didn't get to see this season as much, but I'm pretty sure this season was the same as last year, that they basically did a season of regular season, or a month of regular season, excuse me, and then basically just took a break for 3 weeks for group play and starting the elimination rounds, and then it went back, right before Christmas to the regular season. Like I think if they expand that out, like maybe take like 2 weeks to do group play, and then expand out the elimination in between the actual games, I think that would really help with it, because I feel like it's just essentially creates two seasons. You have the really long season, and then you have the really short season that people still can't figure out if they're going to care about or not care about.
Yeah. And I think the weird
Um,
thing. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
no, I mean, all I was going to say was, even some of the players, like you have guys like LeBron, they cared about it. Like the Lakers' first season, they cared about it, and then you had players this past season in, I think a Final Four type of game, they didn't know if they cared, which
Hmm.
I think they got to figure out. They got to create an incentive uh, for it to feel just like the actual finals, for it to feel like you're, like a trophy is a trophy. Like I know as a Hornets fan, if we win that, I'm ecstatic, because I don't know when we're ever going to win the finals. Like so, even having something uh, in the trophy case would matter a lot to me. But is it felt the same way? I don't know. Because, I mean, like I said, I believe it was like Houston or something like that. I want to say it was Houston. I could be completely wrong, but I want to say that they had some of the issues of like having that inspiration. And I'm like, somebody's got to figure out how to make it matter. I don't know if then you want to have like a champion versus champion game at the
Mm.
end of the season. Um, you know, but I feel like the NBA has to combat that to the point where there's no question. This thing matters. I care about it. I
Mm.
want to win this. So,
Yes. So what I was going to say about the IST, I am an anti-IST guy. I think it's stupid. I think it's gimmicky, and I don't know. I get why they're doing it. They want to bring
oh, so
in more
so you're like,
fans.
oh, those players have a point.
Yeah, no, I completely get. I think it was the Rockets. I think it was maybe Jalen Green, um, who kind of just like wasn't really going after loose balls and stuff like that. Um, I mean, I understand why Silver did it. He wants to increase viewership, and he thinks that if he incentivizes the players with money for winning the IST, then they'll put in a better effort and things like that. But I think for a casual basketball fan, it can get a little bit confusing because, like you said, it is during the regular season, right? It's IST in season tournament. And the early games, I think actually all of the games count towards your regular season record except for the NBA Cup championship. So, like, when the Thunder and Bucks play, whatever that game is, that won't count toward their regular season records. But, I know as a Celtics fan, we were in the same group as the Hawks. So when we played the Hawks in the IST, that counted towards our regular season record. And I mean, there's that incentive to care, I guess, if you're competing for seeding and things like that. But I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. As a fan, I don't really care how my team performs in it. I'd much rather win a finals because that's an actual meaningful championship and a meaningful trophy. I know the Lakers put up that banner last year when they won the IST, but if you ask any Laker fan if they actually claim that or if they're, proud of that, I doubt they say yes. Um, and maybe that's just the standard of the franchise. The Lakers, the Celtics, the standard is an NBA Finals. For a smaller team or a team that's been struggling in recent years, like the Hornets or like the Pelicans or like the Jazz, because the Jazz have had some down years here recently. Maybe that is a bigger deal for fans because they have something to hang their hats on, like you were saying. But for me, um, I don't know. Maybe if you asked me in like 2013 when the Celtics were really bad and we had just gotten rid of the big three. Maybe then I would have cared a little bit more about the IST, but right now, since my team's in a good position, I'd much rather just focus on playing the games, not playing extra games where my stars can get hurt and working towards what really matters, in my opinion, and that's a NBA championship.
well, do you think if they integrated it better into the schedule to the point where you then had to pick, who your starting lineup is? Are you going to have your starters go in this group game, or are you going to basically call up your G League team? Do you think that that would have any effect on your viewership slash, what would the NBA need to do? Because the schedule is definitely interesting, but in a way, it's another cup competition for soccer. So what would get you a better team fan to care about it?
I think the only way I would really, care or deeply pay attention um, is for like the NBA Cup fine. I don't even know what they're calling the championship game for the IST. I know they call it the NBA Cup, but they also call it the in-season tournament. Um, I don't know. It's just hard for me to invest in that and care about that. I maybe that's because I am somebody who's always liked basketball and I'm a little bit traditional in my perspectives on how the season should be played. And, you know, not every sport has to have an in-season tournament or in-season cup like soccer does. I'm fine just playing for one trophy at the end of the year. Um, I think the only way I'd really, really buy in um, is if it was like a guaranteed top team versus top team matchup. But that defeats the whole purpose of the tournament. So I don't know. I think it's just tough for me to come around on something like the IST.
I see. I see. We'll work on it. But the season uh or this year's tournament at least is the Emirates. Which
Oh,
all right,
okay.
let me ask you this: if we named it the Carabao, would you care more?
Oh, I'd be locked in. Catch me at Wembley. Um, but
Liverpool, BC coming out.
but I don't know. I think the tough part just is the fact that, kind of like you spoke to, there's no backing towards it. You know what I mean? There's nothing saying like, "Oh, this is like a serious accomplishment or this means something." For me, it's kind of just for the players, a way for them to make a little bit more money, and for the NBA, I feel like it's an attempt just to connect with a broader audience, excuse me, and expand their revenue. So, like, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't serve fans as much as it serves the league.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I think that's a pretty good take and a pretty good outlook on the current situation of things. Um, darn, I had one comment that just completely left me regarding the tournament itself, but we'll see if it comes back to me at some point. Um, well, I guess we're kind of getting to the end of our topics, but yeah, it is completely yep gone. See ya.
uh,
Uh, Well, yeah, I think that just about covers it. I mean, we have baseball starting up here before too long, obviously. You know, March Madness will be our primary focus next week. And then I think UFL, has that started, spring football?
I don't think so. I think it starts either this week or next week.
Yeah, so there'll be something else to have on the TV whenever things are getting quiet. Um, and then the draft will be in just about a month, I believe. Where are they this year? Are they in Philly? It was Detroit
Mm,
last year.
I think they're in Green Bay this year, actually.
Oh, yep, you are right. I just looked it up. So Green Bay, Wisconsin should be interesting. I'm hoping they put that indoors because last year it worked out great being outdoors in Detroit, but I could easily see it. I guess it's April. I don't know. 50-50 shot with that one there,
Yeah, it's definitely a toss
Goodell.
up.
So yeah, it should be interesting. We'll have more stuff to talk about with that in probably the next 2 weeks or so, or right around tournament time, of course. Yesterday, didn't talk about much of the NFL stuff outside of just league speculation. Uh, Debo Samuel is a commander for free. I 49ers, I mean, I guess at that point he wanted to go, so they weren't able to get a great trade, but a fifth round pick, that is quite shocking to me. The only thing I can think of that justified that was his him saying he wanted to go and then his injury this past season. But I mean, Jaden Daniels has got to be hyped right now.
Yeah, that's a big pickup for Washington if Debo can kind of get back to that form that he was in. Um, his first few years in San Francisco, it was just a weird year for Debo and a weird year for San Francisco this year. So hopefully he's not out of gas, and he can make an impact for the Commanders this upcoming season.
I mean, I think that if even if he doesn't get to the prime that he was in, if he gets to one or two steps below that, I think that's really all Washington needs. I mean, that's already a great team. I believe almost all of their production is coming back. Um, they could be in a great spot going into next season, which talking about a football team from Washington does not does not seem like that would be the case, but they look really good and they have a lot of youth on that team. Like they could do this for a while. Very uncharted territory for a team from Washington slash Landover.
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting times if you're a Commanders fan. You just gotta hope it's not a situation like what happened with Dan Quinn in Atlanta, where they made that run to the Super Bowl. 28-3 happened, and then they went slid right back, and they were like a playoff team the next year, got eliminated early, and then it was 7-9 or 9-7, something not great, mediocrity once again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, 100%. Uh, but obviously that is not the goal, and certainly, hopefully, not on many people's minds in that front office. But you never know. Crazier things have happened by far in the NFL, even in recent memory. So we'll have to see. But going into next season, they've got to be feeling pretty confident over there. Um, but I think that just about wraps us today. Pat, do you have any final thoughts on the episode and then from the past couple weeks?
I think, like we said, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're in for a good March in terms of basketball, both on the men and the women's sides. I'll be honest, I haven't paid too much attention to women, but it seems like there's a lot more parity there this year as well. So hopefully, we get two great tournaments, and come April, we got some good Final Four matchups.
Yeah, no, 100%. That is always the goal going into March. I've watched the women's side a little bit more, and yeah, no, you nail on the head. There's a lot more parity this year. I feel like the past couple seasons, there's only been two or three teams going into a tournament that's like, okay, they're going to win it. This year, you look at the top 10 and go, yep, they all equal shot. They
Mhm.
all got a great shot. So I think we should see a pretty good tournament. I feel like that's one thing with the women's tournament you don't see as much as the men's, is seeing that like big Cinderella story. And I think this year, we could be getting a pretty good one. You never know. Or the blue bloods could come back out and go, nope, this is our time. This is March. But why you gotta play the games? Why you gotta play it? Gotta watch it. You never know what's going to happen. But yeah, here's to a good March. Next week we'll talk about our full-on tournament predictions as we get deeper into all the conference tournaments in play, and we'll start. I think we'll have our first couple champions uh, by next week, so we'll be able to get a better look at the picture. So, until next time, for Pat, I'm TJ. This is 626 Productions. Thanks, everybody.